You open your phone, and there it is, another headline, lighting up timelines. Another rumor rippling through fan pages. Tamar Braxton and Mendeecees messing around. What really going on? Before anyone can hit refresh, the comments explode. Fans are shocked. Emotions ran high, and the internet once again is hungry for answers. But here's the twist: today isn't about declaring what's true or false. It's about the noise, the whispers, the way stories are being told, reshaped, and dramatized in real time. Because when two familiar names get pulled into the same sentence, even a question mark can feel like a verdict. Screenshots start circulating. Vague posts are decoded like secret messages. A single emoji becomes proof. And suddenly, what might have been nothing more than coincidence turns into a narrative that refuses to stay quiet. You've seen it before: the slow burn of speculation, the quick leap to conclusions. The emotional investment from fans who feel like they know these people personally. So what's actually happening here? Are these reports pointing to something real? Or are we watching another internet storm build out of fragments and assumptions? The tension isn't in what we can confirm and how quickly the story is being written for them. Friends are being dragged into the conversation. Past relationships are being reopened. Old wounds are being quoted, clipped, and replayed as if they were scenes from a reality show. And that's why you're here. Not for a verdict, not for a declaration, but for the drama of how such stories come to life. We're unpacking the chatter, the reactions, the emotional stakes that fans believe are on the line. We're exploring why this rumor has people choosing sides, why some are defending fiercely while others are demanding explanations, and why the family, at least in the court of public opinion, is already being described as divided. So stay with me, because what you're about to hear isn't about what happened, it's about what people are saying is happening, and how that alone can turn two names into the center of a storm. The rumor did not arrive quietly. It slipped into the timeline through a blurry screenshot, a half-heard voice note, a caption that said everything and nothing at the same time. Fans are shocked, not because they saw proof, but because the names were enough. Tamar Braxton, Mendeecees. Two worlds that were never supposed to touch. Suddenly placed side by side in whispers that spread faster than facts. Emotions ran high almost immediately. Some people laughed it off as another internet fantasy, but others leaned in, dissecting every detail like detectives chasing a headline that did not yet exist. It started with a late-night post from a popular gossip page, vague enough to be safe, bold enough to stir chaos. A shadowy photo from what looked like a private lounge to silhouettes seated close. The caption asking, not stating, what really going on? That question mark was all it took. Fans rushed into the comments, tagging friends, dropping fire emojis, demanding clarity. Within hours, reaction videos popped up, live streams broke out, and suddenly everyone had a theory. The story was not about what happened. It was about what people believed might have happened. Tamar, known for her raw honesty and emotional transparency, became the center of speculation without saying a word. Her supporters jumped to her defense, calling the chatter disrespectful, reminding everyone of how often her life had been turned into entertainment against her will. But others were not so patient. They pulled old clips, old interviews, moments where she spoke about betrayal, about being tired of being misunderstood. Every sentence was reinterpreted as if it were a hidden message about this very moment. Mendeecees, usually guarded in private when it comes to public drama, was suddenly being discussed like a character in a reality show storyline. Fans analyzed his recent movements, his appearances, his social media activity. Who was he following? Who had unfollowed him? Which posts were deleted? Which stories were left up for just a few minutes before disappearing? In the court of online opinion, absence became evidence, and silence became suspicious. Friends and so-called insiders added fuel to the fire, not by confirming anything, but by hinting that something complicated was happening behind the scenes. One person claimed they had seen them in the same place on the same night. Another said there was a conversation that had gotten heated. A third insisted there was nothing romantic, just business, just coincidence. But the internet does not thrive on calm explanations. It feeds on uncertainty. The more unclear the situation became, the more dramatic the narrative grew. What made the story explode was not the alleged moment itself, but the emotional weight people attached to it. Fans are shocked because both names carry history. Tamar's past relationships have played out under bright lights, often ending with heartbreak that she never tried to hide. Mendeecees' life has also been marked by public scrutiny, loyalty debates, and family tensions that fans feel invested in. When those histories collide in a rumor, it feels like a crossover episode nobody asked for, but everyone wants to watch. Online. The reactions split quickly. Some voices were loud with excitement, calling it unexpected, even iconic. They joked about unlikely connections, treating the situation like a plot twist in a long-running series. Others were furious. They spoke about respect, about boundaries, about how damaging it is to throw people into a narrative without facts. The family was left divided, at least in the eyes of the audience, with supporters choosing sides before anyone involved had acknowledged anything at all. Then came the emotional breakdowns in comment sections and live chats. Fans wrote long messages about trust, about disappointment, about how tired they were of seeing public figures dragged into stories that could hurt real relationships. At the same time, the same fans kept refreshing for updates, caught between moral outrage and irresistible curiosity. That contradiction is what kept the rumor alive. Outrage did not stop the conversation. It multiplied it. Some creators began reconstructing a timeline, even though there was no confirmed starting point. They spoke about a supposed meeting that may or may not have happened. They described a moment in a room full of people where a glance was exchanged, where a laugh was shared. They treated possibility as if it were memory. Dialogues were imagined. "Did you see how close they were sitting?" one voice said. "That doesn't look like nothing," another replied. "You can't judge from a picture." But the debate itself became content, recycled across platforms with dramatic music and bold thumbnails. In this storm of speculation, both Tamar and Mendeecees became almost silent characters in a story written by strangers. Every move they made was watched. If Tamar posted something about strength, it was read as a response. If Mendeecees shared a motivational quote, it was framed as damage control. Even their absence from certain spaces was treated as a statement. Fans are shocked not just by the rumor, but by how quickly people's lives can be turned into a narrative they did not consent to. Behind the screens, people began to imagine the emotional conflicts that could exist if any of this were true. They spoke about betrayal, about loyalty, about how such a situation would ripple through families, friendships, and existing relationships. They pictured arguments in private rooms, late-night phone calls filled with accusations, tears, and denials. They wrote fictional scenes and comment threads, turning rumor into drama. Drama into a story that felt almost real because so many were participating in it. And yet, in the middle of all that noise, there was a strange emptiness. No confirmation. No direct denial. Just the echo of voices talking about what they thought they saw, what they believed they heard, what they felt must be happening. It created a tension that did not resolve. Every day without a clear answer made the story feel heavier, as if something important was being hidden, even if there was nothing there at all. The most intense reactions came from those who felt personally invested. Longtime supporters of Tamar spoke about how protective they were of her heart, how every rumor reopened old wounds from past public breakups. They accused the internet of trying to script another painful chapter for her. On the other side, those close to Mendeecees and fan communities talked about respect, about how unfair it was to link his name to something without evidence. Both groups were defending, but they were also clashing, turning a rumor into a battleground. What made it even more dramatic was how quickly the language escalated. Words like betrayal, deception, secret meetings, and hidden agendas were thrown around as if they were facts. Emotions ran high in every discussion space. People were not just talking about two individuals anymore. They were talking about values, about loyalty, about what it means to trust public figures they feel connected to. The rumor became a mirror for everyone's own fears about relationships and honesty through all of this. The original question remained untouched. What's really going on? Not what happened, not what is proven, but what is being said. And the answer, at least so far, was chaos. 1,000 voices telling 1,000 versions of the same unconfirmed story, each version adding another layer of drama, another imagined conflict, another emotional stake. This is how a headline is born before the facts. A question becomes a suggestion becomes a belief becomes a narrative. And once a narrative takes hold, it does not need evidence to survive. It only needs attention. Every click, every comment, every reaction. Every click, every comment, every reaction. The rumor did not end with that first post. It kept evolving, shaped by reactions, by imagined dialogues, by the collective desire to know more. Fans are shocked. Emotions ran high, and the family, at least in the story being told online, is already being described as divided. Not because anything has been proven, but because the idea alone has been powerful enough to create conflict where there may be none. The conversations did not slow down. They multiplied. What had started as a single post became a web of theories, stitched together by screenshots, anonymous messages, and the kind of storytelling only the internet can create. People were no longer asking if the rumor was real. They were asking how long it had been going on. Timelines were drawn from nothing but guesses. Someone claimed the tension had been building for months. Another insisted it was sudden, a spark that no one saw coming. Each new version sounded more convincing than the last because it was told with confidence. Even when it was built on air, fans are shocked by how quickly speculation turned into emotional investment. You could see it in the comments, in the way people spoke as if they were part of the situation. They talked about loyalty as if it were personal. They spoke about betrayal as if it were happening in their own homes. Some wrote that they felt disappointed. Others said they felt protective. And a few admitted they were just here for the drama, even while knowing it might not be real. Emotions ran high, not because of facts, but because of the stories people were telling themselves. What intensified the narrative was the idea of private conflict. The internet loves the thought that something heated is happening behind closed doors. Suddenly, people began imagining scenes that had never been confirmed. A late-night phone call that turned into an argument. Voices raised, questions asked, silence on the other end. They pictured a moment when someone said, "What is really going on?" And another replied, "It is not what you think." These imagined dialogues spread like quotes from a show that had never aired. Friends and associates were pulled into the story without warning. If someone liked a post, it was treated as support. If someone stayed quiet, it was seen as taking sides. The family was left divided in the eyes of the public, even though no one had made a statement. Fans dissected every interaction, every public appearance, every photo where someone looked serious instead of smiling. Normal human behavior became evidence in a case built entirely on assumption. There was a moment when a short clip resurfaced, something from the past that had nothing to do with the present rumor. But it was edited and reposted with a new caption that suggested hidden meaning. People watched it over and over, looking for clues that were never meant to be there. A laugh became a signal. A pause became a confession. In the comment sections, strangers argued as if they were eyewitnesses. One said, "You can see it in their eyes." Another replied, "You are reading into nothing." But both kept watching. Both kept sharing. As the story grew, so did the emotional stakes people attached to it. Supporters of Tamar spoke about her vulnerability, about how public speculation had hurt her in the past. They wrote long messages about how tired they were of seeing her name dragged into stories that could reopen old wounds. They accused the internet of turning her life into entertainment again. At the same time, they could not stop engaging with the content. Caught between wanting to protect and wanting to understand, those who followed Mendeecees closely expressed a different kind of frustration. They talked about respect, about how damaging it was to link his name to something without proof. They pointed out that silence does not equal guilt, that privacy should not be treated as secrecy. But their voices were often drowned out by louder, more dramatic interpretations. In the economy of attention.com, explanations rarely go viral. Conflict does. Creators who specialized in gossip and commentary began building entire segments around the rumor. They used careful language, saying things like, "Reports are coming out. People are talking. Fans are shocked." They never claimed anything happened, but they framed the story in a way that made it feel as if something must be happening. They described supposed reactions from insiders, the emotional toll, the potential fallout. Viewers were pulled in not by facts, but by the promise of drama. And with every retelling, the story changed slightly. In one version, the connection was said to be emotional, a deep conversation that crossed boundaries. In another, it was portrayed as something more, a secret that could break trust. Some insisted it was all about business, a collaboration misunderstood. Others dismissed that explanation as too simple, because simplicity does not satisfy a hungry audience. The rumor became a shapeshifter, adapting to whatever narrative would keep people watching. What made it even more intense was the way people began to speak about consequences that had not happened. They talked about broken relationships, about families hurt, about friendships that would never be the same. They imagined confrontations that might be taking place in living rooms and private cars. Moments of anger followed by tears, accusations followed by denials. These scenes were described in detail as if someone had been there. Even though they were pure invention, fans are shocked not only by the rumor itself, but by how real it began to feel. When enough people repeat a story, it starts to take on weight. It becomes something you react to emotionally, even if you know somewhere in the back of your mind that it might not be true. That is the strange power of collective storytelling. It turns questions into experiences, speculation into something that feels almost like memory. There was also a shift in tone as the days went on. What began as curiosity slowly turned into judgment. Some people started asking why no one was addressing it. Others demanded statements, apologies, clarity. The absence of official responses was interpreted as avoidance, even though it could just as easily mean there was nothing to respond to. In the court of public opinion, silence rarely gets the benefit of the doubt. The drama reached a point where even unrelated posts were pulled into the narrative. A photo of Tamar smiling was read as a sign of defiance. A post from Mendeecees about growth and focus was framed as a coded message. People began to speak about timing, about how certain posts appeared just after a wave of speculation. As if every online move were part of a strategy, reality became secondary to interpretation. And yet, beneath the spectacle, there was a quiet question that few wanted to sit with. What if none of this is real? What if the entire storm is built on a misunderstanding, a coincidence, a moment taken out of context? That possibility existed, but it was less exciting than the imagined drama. Acknowledging it would mean letting go of the emotional narrative people had already invested in. The more the rumor circulated, the more it began to reflect back on the audience itself. People argued not just about what might be happening, but about what should happen. They debated values, loyalty, boundaries, respect. Some said that even if nothing physical occurred, emotional closeness could still be a betrayal. Others countered that adults are allowed to have conversations, to exist in the same space without being accused of wrongdoing. The story became a stage for everyone's personal beliefs. About relationships, what remained constant through all of it was the language of shock and division. Fans are shocked. Emotions ran high. The family was left divided. These phrases were repeated until they became the soundtrack of the conversation. They gave the rumor a sense of gravity, of importance, even without evidence. They made it feel like a chapter in an ongoing saga rather than a fleeting piece of gossip. And in this ongoing saga, the real people at the center were still silent, still living their lives outside the frame of speculation. But their silence did not stop the story from growing. If anything, it gave it more room to expand, more space for imagination to fill. Every hour without clarity became another opportunity for someone to add a new twist. Another layer of supposed meaning. By now, the rumor was no longer just a question about what really going on. It had become a reflection of how quickly narratives are built, how easily emotion can be stirred, how readily audiences can become participants in a story that exists only in fragments. The internet had taken two names and turned them into a symbol of possible conflict, of imagined betrayal, of drama that felt real because so many people were talking about it. And the conversation showed no signs of stopping. It was evolving, deepening, drawing in more voices, more interpretations, more emotional reactions. Not because anything new had been confirmed, but because the story itself had become the attraction. The noise eventually reached a level where even people who had tried to ignore it were pulled in. Group chats lit up with the same question. What really going on? Coworkers whispered about it during breaks. Timelines refreshed with the same recycled clips and captions. It was no longer just a rumor floating in certain corners of the internet. It had become a shared topic of conversation, one that people felt compelled to have an opinion on. Even if that opinion was simply, "This is all too much." Simply, "This is all too much." What made this stage of the story different was the introduction of supposed reactions from those around them. Anonymous messages began to circulate, claiming to speak for friends, for family, for insiders who knew the truth but could not reveal their names. One message said there was tension in private spaces, that conversations had turned cold, that trust was being questioned. Another insisted that everything was being blown out of proportion, that nothing inappropriate had ever taken place. But both were presented with the same sense of authority. And for many viewers, authority was less about proof and more about how confidently something was said. Fans are shocked by how quickly the narrative began to feel personal. People were no longer discussing two public figures in abstract terms. They were talking about imagined emotional fallout. They spoke about how it must feel to be accused of something you did not do. They also spoke about how it must feel to see your name attached to someone else in a way that invites judgment. Empathy and outrage existed side by side, often in the same comment. In some corners, the conversation took on a darker tone. There were accusations not just of behavior, but of character. Some questioned motives, suggesting hidden agendas, secret desires, long-standing issues finally coming to the surface. These claims were never supported by facts, but they were shared with conviction. Each share added another layer of perceived reality. The story did not need evidence anymore. It was sustained by belief. What kept the tension alive was the idea of confrontation. People began to speak as if a reckoning were inevitable. They imagined a moment when everything would come out, when voices would be raised, when tears would fall. They described a scene where someone finally asked for the truth, and another either admitted something or walked away in silence. These imagined confrontations were written in detail, as if they were spoilers from an upcoming episode that everyone was waiting to see. And then there were the reactions from fans who felt torn. They wrote about loving both figures, about not wanting to believe anything negative, about being caught between defending and doubting. Their comments were filled with uncertainty. They asked for clarity, for honesty, for something that could put an end to the speculation. Emotions ran high not because of what had been proven, but because of the emotional investment people had built around the possibility of conflict. The family was left divided in the narrative that was forming online. Not because any family member had spoken publicly, but because audiences projected their own ideas of how families react to rumors. Some imagined support and unity, others imagined disappointment and distance. The idea of family tension became another dramatic element, another reason for viewers to stay engaged. It added weight to the story, making it feel less like gossip and more like a potential emotional crisis. Creators continued to frame the situation carefully, always returning to the language of possibility. They said things like, "If these reports are true," or "people are saying," or "fans are wondering." But the way the stories were told, with suspenseful music and emotionally charged language, made it easy to forget that nothing had been confirmed. The structure of the content itself encouraged viewers to feel as if they were watching something unfold in real time, as more people joined the conversation. The story began to take on a life of its own. New details were added not from verified sources, but from collective imagination. Someone claimed there had been a private conversation that changed everything. Another said there was a moment when someone almost spoke out but decided against it. Each addition made the narrative more complex, more dramatic, and, in a strange way, more believable to those who wanted a story to follow. There was also a growing sense of frustration. Some viewers started pushing back, questioning why everyone was so quick to assume the worst. They pointed out how harmful it can be to attach serious implications to two people based on nothing more than speculation. They reminded others that public figures are still human, still affected by what is said about them. But even these voices became part of the drama, framed as one side of an ongoing debate rather than as a call for caution. Fans are shocked by how easily lines were drawn. You were either defending or accusing, believing or dismissing. There was little room for uncertainty, even though uncertainty was all anyone truly had. The internet prefers clear roles in a story: heroes and villains, victims and betrayers. A rumor without defined roles feels incomplete, so people began assigning them, often unconsciously based on their own loyalties and emotions. The emotional language continued to escalate. Words like hurt, trust, loyalty, and respect were repeated again and again. People wrote as if they were speaking to those involved directly, offering advice, expressing disappointment, pleading for honesty. These messages, though directed at public figures, often revealed more about the writers themselves, their own fears about relationships, their own experiences with betrayal or misunderstanding. At the same time, there was an undercurrent of exhaustion. Some admitted they were tired of the cycle of seeing every interaction turned into a scandal, every silence treated as guilt. They questioned why audiences demand access to every aspect of a public figure's life, why rumors are given so much power. But even this exhaustion did not stop the conversation. It simply became another emotional layer within it. What was striking was how quickly the story shifted from being about a specific rumor to being about what that rumor represented. It became a symbol of how easily narratives are created, how fragile reputations can be, how quickly people can be placed into dramatic roles they never chose. The details of the original claim became almost secondary to the broader discussion about privacy, respect, and the cost of constant scrutiny. And yet, despite all the reflection, the core tension remained unresolved. There was still no clear statement, no definitive answer, no moment that could close the chapter. The absence of resolution kept the story suspended like a cliffhanger that refused to drop. Every new day brought the possibility of either confirmation or complete dismissal. And that possibility alone was enough to keep people watching in this suspended state. The rumor continued to shape conversations. People revisited old content, looking for signs they might have missed. They speculated about future interactions, about whether certain people would appear together publicly or avoid each other entirely. They treated upcoming events as potential turning points in a story that had not even been proven to exist. Fans are shocked not only by the rumor itself, but by their own reactions to it. Many recognized how quickly they had become emotionally involved, how easily they had taken sides, how deeply they cared about something that might be nothing more than a misunderstanding amplified by attention. That realization brought discomfort. But it did not erase the feelings that had already formed. Through all of this, one truth became clear. The story was no longer just about what might be happening between two individuals. It was about the collective experience of watching a narrative form in real time. About the way audiences contribute to the drama by reacting, sharing, and speculating. Every comment, every post, every video added another thread to the web. The rumor had become a mirror, reflecting the desires, fears, and habits of the culture that consumed it. People wanted answers, but they also wanted excitement. They wanted truth, but they were drawn to drama. They wanted to protect the people they admired, but they were also fascinated by the possibility of conflict. These contradictions lived side by side, fueling a conversation that refused to settle. And so the story remained in motion, carried forward by attention rather than evidence. Not because anything new had been revealed, but because the question itself had become too compelling to let go. What really going on was no longer just a headline. It was the heartbeat of an ongoing drama, one that existed as much in the minds of the audience as it did in any alleged moment that started it all. The longer the conversation lasted, the more it began to reshape itself into something larger than a single rumor. What people were now reacting to was not a specific claim, but the emotional atmosphere that had grown around it. It felt like everyone was waiting for a turning point. A moment that would either validate all the speculation or make it collapse under its own weight. Until that moment arrived, the story lived in a strange in-between space. Half drama, half reflection. Some fans started to imagine what resolution might look like. They pictured a calm statement that would put everything to rest. A simple message saying nothing happened. Please respect our privacy. Others imagined something more dramatic. A confession, a confrontation, an emotional explanation that would finally make sense of all the tension. Both possibilities carried their own emotional charge. The first offered relief. The second promised closure through truth. Even if that truth were painful, fans are shocked by how deeply they wanted an ending. It revealed how invested they had become, how the story had moved from being something they scrolled past to something they felt. People talked about checking updates first thing in the morning, about feeling a jolt of emotion every time a new post appeared. What began as curiosity had turned into attachment. Attachment always demands resolution. There were also those who began to speak about accountability, not in terms of ability, not in terms of. The emotional language did not fade. People continued to use words like hurt and trust, even though nothing had been confirmed. They spoke about how easily reputations can be damaged, how quickly relationships can be questioned in the public eye. Some admitted that they felt uncomfortable with how much they had participated in the speculation. They recognized that they were reacting to a story that might not exist. And yet the feelings were real. What stood out was how the rumor had created a sense of collective experience. Strangers from different places were having the same conversations, feeling the same mix of excitement, concern, and frustration. They were united not by facts, but by attention. The story had become a shared emotional event, something that people bonded over even as they argued about it. The family was left divided in the narrative that continued to circulate. But what that really meant was that audiences had divided themselves. Some leaned toward protection, others toward suspicion. Some demanded answers, others urged patience. Each side believed it was acting out of care, out of a desire for what they felt was right. The conflict was not just about two individuals anymore. It was about values, about how people believe public figures should handle rumors, about where the line between curiosity and intrusion should be drawn. As time passed, a subtle shift occurred. The intensity of the speculation began to compete with a growing awareness of its own fragility. People started to ask, what if this all disappears tomorrow? What if the next trending story replaces this one, and everything we have argued about simply fades? That thought was unsettling because it suggested that the emotional energy poured into the narrative might never lead to anything tangible. And yet, even that awareness did not fully quiet the conversation. The story had reached a point where it fed on its own existence. It was no longer dependent on new information. It was sustained by the community that had formed around it, by the constant exchange of opinions, by the emotional reactions that kept it alive. Fans are shocked not only by what they think might be happening, but by how quickly they themselves became part of the drama. Many recognized that they were no longer just observers. Through comments, shares, and discussions, they had helped shape the narrative. They had added their voices to the chorus, influencing how others perceived the situation. The line between audience and participant had blurred. There was also Keza, a quieter undercurrent of empathy that ran through the noise. Some people wrote about how difficult it must be to live under constant scrutiny, to know that any interaction can be turned into a story. They spoke about the human cost of rumor, about stress, anxiety, and the feeling of being watched. These messages did not always go viral, but they added a different emotional texture to the conversation, one that reminded others that there are real lives behind the headlines. The imagined confrontations that had once fueled the drama began to feel less satisfying. People started to realize that even if there were a dramatic moment, it would not necessarily provide the clarity they wanted. Life rarely unfolds like a scripted show. Answers can be messy, partial, or never fully revealed. This realization created a new kind of tension, a quiet one, rooted in the uncertainty of ever truly knowing. And still, the question lingered. What really going on? It hovered over every discussion, every reaction, every piece of content created around the rumor. It became almost symbolic, representing not just this situation, fluffed, but the broader way people consume stories about public figures. It asked whether we are more interested in truth or in the emotional journey that speculation provides. The longer the story existed without confirmation, the more it exposed the mechanics of modern gossip. A single post can ignite a wave. That wave can turn into a narrative. The narrative can become an emotional event. And once it reaches that stage, it no longer needs a factual foundation to continue. It only needs attention and feeling. Fans are shocked by how familiar this pattern is, even as they participate in it. Many could name other moments when a rumor took on a life of its own, when speculation overshadowed reality. They recognized the cycle, yet found themselves drawn into it again. There was something compelling about being part of a shared moment, about collectively waiting for an outcome, even if that outcome might never come down in the end. What this story had become was less about any alleged interaction and more about the power of narrative. It showed how easily people can be cast into roles, how quickly assumptions can harden into beliefs, how emotionally invested audiences can become in situations they do not truly know. It revealed the hunger for drama, but also the underlying desire for connection, for understanding, for a sense that stories have meaning beyond mere entertainment. The rumor did not give people what they initially thought they wanted, which was clarity. Instead, it gave them something else. It offered a mirror, reflecting how they react to uncertainty, how they handle not knowing, how they balance empathy with curiosity. It turned a simple question into a complex emotional experience. And as the conversation continued, one thing became increasingly clear. Whether the story eventually faded away or was addressed directly, it had already left an impression. It had shown how quickly attention can transform possibility into perceived reality. It had demonstrated how fans can become emotionally entangled in narratives that exist largely in the realm of speculation. It had highlighted the fragile boundary between public interest and personal life, so the drama remained. Not as a confirmed event, but as a living discussion. A space where emotions ran high, where fans are shocked, where the family was left divided in the story being told online. Not because something definite had occurred, but because the idea of it had been powerful enough to shape conversations, feelings, and connections. What really going on may never be answered in the way people expect. But the journey of watching this narrative unfold has already told its own story. A story about attention, about emotion, about the human tendency to seek meaning in uncertainty. A story that, for better or worse, became just as real in the hearts of those following it as any confirmed event ever could.